Turn. Okay. We're gonna talk about tonight. We're gonna talk about the beginning of Chodesh Nisan, and then we're gonna talk about there's a lot to do with Pesach. A lot of halachos. Uh, what we'll focus on is the bedikas chametz, checking for chametz. Um, and next week we'll continue talking. There's no shortage of stuff that we can learn about for Pesach. So first we'll start with the month of Nisan. There's some interesting halachas that come with the month of Nisan. That the first halacha is that it's a mitzvah to study halachas of Pesach 30 days before Pesach, and we start doing that already from Purim. So the very fact that we are on this Zoom right now, and talking and learning about Pesach, we're fulfilling that obligation that's brought down in the Shulchan Aruch that we're supposed to study 30 days before Pesach. Some say that really before every holiday we're supposed to start learning 30 days in advance. But others say no, this is a special idea in regard to Pesach because in Pesach there's so many halachos. There's matzah and there's different dishes and the bedikas chametz. There's a lot of stuff, so that's why maybe it's just Pesach that's 30 days. Um, but that's definitely a an idea for Pesach. Then the next halacha which I don't think that many people are aware about is that's brought down in regard to Pesach. Is the idea is to it's called ma'os chitim. Ma'os means money. Chitim is like wheat. That um, the Ramah he writes that the minhag is to give wheat or flour to poor people for their needs on Pesach. Um, and they explain that this minhag is really comes from the Gemara in Yerushalmi, um, to to give poor people their needs for Pesach so that they can have matzah to fulfill their mitzvah. Um, and the minhag in recent generations is to not only give flour and wheat for matzah, but also give poor people all their needs for Yantif. I remember my Rebbe in Yeshiva, Rabbi Leibowitz, he tells me that every year before Yantif, he walks into his office. He says that it happens every year that he walks into his office and he sees on his desk an envelope with a bunch of cash in it, and he doesn't know who it's from. And it says, and it writes, I'm so thankful to God that I'm able to make Yantif with my family. Um, so I just wanted to give money to those people who aren't able to do that or need some help doing that. So that's I think similar to this idea is that you know we're so grateful to God that we're able to make our own yantif, um, spend the holiday with everything that we need and also connect to our family. That is a way of sort of just thanking God and making sure also that we're looking out for people who need it. That's a halacha that's brought down by the Ramah. It's called Ma'us Chitin. Um, then in regards to the month of Nisan, um, it would seem that the month of Nisan has some more holiness to it. And in fact, in the month of Nisan, we do not say Tachnun once. So why don't we say Tachnun? So um, so really in the Rosh Chodesh Nisan, the first day of Nisan, that was the day the Mishkan was put up. And for the next 12 days, um, in Parshas Naso in Bamidbar, when Bnei Israel were put up the Mishkan. So each one of the Nisim, the princes, they they of all different tribes, they bring a korban. So day one tribe, their prince brought, and then the next day a different one. And so for each of those 12 days, each one of them is bringing a korban, and so it was like a special yom tov, for each of the different shvatim. So all 12 of those days, we don't say Tachman to remember that. In addition, then Erev Pesach and Pesach itself are also holy days, and then there's also the day after Pesach, which is a holy day. So once the majority of the month is is a holy day and a day that we're not saying tachlin, so we say the entire month we view as extra, a little bit extra holy, and we don't say tachlin for all the month of Nisan. And finally, there's this idea of the Shabbos before Pesach. Shabbos before Pesach, Shulchan Aruch says, it's called Shabbos Hagadol, the big Shabbos, the great Shabbos, because of the miracle that happened on Shabbos Hagadol. And the Ramah says that because of this Shabbos, because of this great miracle, the minhag is to start reading the Haggadah. That people actually start reading the Haggadah from that Shabbos. Many people have the custom to do that, because that's when the miracle started happening. What is the miracle that we're referring to? So the Mishnah Berurah explains that when the Jews were leaving Egypt, they took their sheep, and the Egyptians saw them taking their sheep, which is the Egyptians' gods, to slaughter for the Korban Pesach. They were very upset about it, but they were not allowed to protest them, and that was already the start of the miracle. So since it's the start of the miracle, there's that happened on Shabbos, the Shabbos for Pesach. Um, since it's already the start of the miracle, we start saying Haggadah, and this is an extra special Shabbos. Not everyone, the Vilna Gaon, he did not start saying the Haggadah from that Shabbos, but a lot of people have the practice to do so. Start saying already, reading parts of the Haggadah from the Shabbos before Pesach. So that's in regards to the month of Nisan. What we'll focus on the rest of tonight is this topic about checking for chametz, the bedika. Bedika means checking, and bittul, the bittul chametz means the idea of nullifying your chametz. So that's what we'll speak about. That the halacha is that a person is obligated to destroy all chametz from its possession before Pesach. So really, from a Torah obligation, if a person simply nullifies, and we'll talk about what it means to nullify, right? That's the word we're using, nullify. A person nullifies his chametz and essentially declares it ownerless. Then from a Torah obligation, you fulfilled destroying your chametz, because all chametz that you have, right, you declare that I don't own it anymore. So I technically have no more chametz. So from a Torah obligation, I've done enough, and I don't need to, if I walk around my house and check for chametz, I don't need to burn my chametz. But however, the Chazal, they had two concerns. That number one, they were worried that the person wouldn't, even though they said they would nullify their chametz and declare that all chametz that they own is owner is worthless to them. They were worried that that's a little bit hard for people to separate from their money, their possessions. You can imagine if you have an expensive bottle of whiskey and you're saying it's ownerless. It's ownerless. I'm viewing it as nothing, but then it's sitting right there on your shelf, right? And after Pesach, it's still sitting there, right? It might not be so worthless to you anymore, right? So they declared that we should check for chametz and destroy any chametz that we have as sort of a safety measure, right? That to make sure that we really are viewing it as ownerless. Another thing that Chazal, they were worried that if we didn't destroy the chametz from our house, we're used to eating chametz all the time. Bread is kosher, right? We eat bread all the time. Bread is kosher. So if I'm not thinking, or I wake up in the middle of the night, half awake, I'm a little hungry, open the pantry, right, and I take a snack, I see some Oreos there, I might forget it's Pesach and I start eating the Oreos, and that wouldn't be good. So they thought that, so they declared that we should destroy all the chametz from our house, as a rabbinical obligation, even though technically nullifying it might work. So in addition to checking for chametz, so what we do is we check for chametz, make sure to destroy it, and then we also nullify our chametz too, in case we missed some of our chametz when we did our check, and then we would be in violation of seeing or finding our chametz, the chametz that we own on Pesach. So that's this idea of bedika chametz, and nullifying chametz. So when should you check for chametz? So we check for chametz the beginning of the night of the 14th, right after Pesach HaKochavim, after the stars come out, because that's when people are home. So that the 14th of Nisan, that's when you check. Also, we check with candles. We'll talk about that. And at night, because then it's easier to see the chametz, to find the chametz by the night, by the light of in the night and the light of the candle. It's best not to do your official bedika check before the night of the 14th. You can definitely start cleaning before the night of the 14th. That's not when you have to start your cleaning, but it's best not to do the official bedika chametz until the night of the 14th. And if you did your official bedika, there may be some bracha issues, but so that's why we do it on the 14th. And there's this idea of that before, if you get to the 14th of Nisan, and once the stars come out, you shouldn't really do any work, you shouldn't eat, you shouldn't even really learn any Torah until you do your checking of chametz, because we're worried that you might forget to do it. So we want you to do it right away, as soon as possible. So what places do you need to check? You basically need to check any place that you have any sort of concern that you might have brought chametz. If the room has never had any food in it, then you don't need to check it. But if the room has had food in it, and you know sometimes bring food in it, then you should check that room. Within a room, you only need to check the places where it's possible that chametz got into. The top of your very large bookshelf, which you're not eating over there, so you don't need to check that food. There's no concern that chametz might have got there. But if there is a concern that chametz was there, then you should check there. In the place where you eat, right, your dining room, you need to check under the tables and the benches because it's very likely that food fell down. They write that the halacha is that in the kids' rooms you have to check under the beds because maybe the kids brought chametz under the bed, or maybe the kids are hiding chametz under the bed. Okay, that I assume also in the adult room too. Some people like to sneak some food into their room. Maybe check under the beds there. They say make sure to check your pockets because pockets. Some people sometimes I don't know. I guess you might have someone hand you a cookie, you might stick it in your pocket. I don't know. But check your pockets too. If you know the chametz is in a certain part of the floor where your hand can't reach there, like let's say the example I can think about is if chametz is under the fridge. I can't really reach there. So do I need to move the fridge? And I know it's possible that sometimes crumbs fall and stuff get pushed under the fridge. So do I need to move the fridge and vacuum under there? So the halacha is I think that if you can't reach it and there's no concern you're going to get it, and certainly no concern that you're going to eat the crumb that's under the fridge, then it's enough if you just nullify it and say that that is worthless to you because again, there's no concern that you're first of all even going to touch it, and certainly there's no concern you're going to eat that. So it's enough to just nullify and declare it worthless to you because it in fact is worthless to you. If you knew there was chametz in the room, but this is a relevant halacha, but you have a pet that sometimes will eat your chametz, so you may be able to rely on that, the fact that your pet may have ate the chametz if you can't find any chametz in the room, and you once put some cookies in this room and you can't find it, so you may be able to rely on the fact that you have a pet who likes to eat your cookies. In a shul or a yeshiva, the shamish, the person in charge of taking care of the shul, should make sure to check for chametz, and he can even make a bracha on this pedika. So, what do we check with? We check with the bedika should be done. The Shulchan Aruch says check with a candle, but don't use a torch. Don't use a torch because if you use a torch, you're going to be afraid to check in for like small cracks because you're not going to want to start a fire, God forbid. And also don't use an oil candle because the oil will drip. So the big question is, so could I use a flashlight or a lantern? I think most people would use a flashlight with a lantern nowadays. And so it would seem that using flashlight or lantern is actually better because you're going to check much better. If I have a flashlight, I'm going to be more comfortable taking that flashlight and going under the bed or different places where I'd be less comfortable if I had a real fire. And most modern day poskim go from Moshe Feinstein, Ravar, and Cutler, well, Yashev, a whole bunch of people who said that a lamp and a flashlight works. Um, some disagree, and many recommend that you should use a candle in the very, very beginning. Like when you make the bracha, you should still use a candle for the first minute or two, so that the checking, that so the bedika happens in a way that the rabbis officially declared, and then afterwards you just use the flashlight. Um, Even if you have to check in the day for some reason, if you're checking in the day, you should still use a light because that's better. The custom is also that many use a feather to gather up the honey. Do you need to turn off all the lights in the house when you check? So many posts can say no, it is not required. That's from the Chazon Ish, from Moshe, etc. What bracha do you say? What bracha do you say on the checking? So before you do the checking, you make the bracha. It's going to be a little counterintuitive, but the bracha is on the destroying of chametz, al biur chametz. It's a little bit strange because what we're doing, we're not. You might think that what we're doing right now is we're checking for chametz. We're not destroying chametz, right? But we do that nowadays. We go walk around the house and check for chametz. We don't destroy the chametz till the next day. Nevertheless, the bracha is on destroying chametz because the end goal, the whole purpose of doing the checking is to find it so that you can destroy it. So that's the bracha that you make. You shouldn't speak from the time that you make the bracha until you start doing the checking, and it's proper to avoid speaking during the entire checking. So that make sure you do a good checking, right? If you speak, you're going to get distracted. You're not going to do as good of a check. But if you did speak, you don't need to make a new bracha. If you're checking multiple houses, good for you that you can check multiple houses, but you should you can make one bracha that fulfills multiple houses. And if it's hard for somebody to check, let's say it's hard to move around so much that you can appoint someone to check for you. But the person you should make the bracha and have the person who's checking for you stand right next to you. That person will answer amen to your bracha and then do the check around your house. There's a custom that the Ramah quotes to leave 10 pieces of bread out. This is a very famous custom, and to search for those pieces of bread. How did this custom start? I think most people do this. They leave 10 pieces of bread out and they look for them. So why do we do that? So the reason is because a lot of times when we're doing the checking, we have cleaned our house so well at this point that there isn't a single crumb of chametz in the entire house. Our houses are entirely spotless. So some are concerned that if I make the bracha on looking for chametz, destroying chametz, and I don't actually have any chametz in my house, that maybe this is a bracha levatala. This is a like worthless bracha because I didn't find any chametz. So there must suggest that there's a custom to leave 10 pieces of bread. So then for sure I'm going to find chametz, and then I'm for sure going to destroy chametz. That's where this minhag started. Others say the Mishnah Berurah quotes that even if you don't find any bread, that's not a worthless bracha. That's not a bracha levatala because the bracha isn't on finding and destroying bread. It's the bracha because I'm checking for chametz. So even if I don't find anything, I still check for chametz. So that's not a worthless bracha at all. Mishnah Berurah just says, just be very careful not to lose one of your pieces of bread because then you have a big problem. And then you have the piece of bread in your house and Pesach is coming, you don't know where it is. I remember in lower school that they used to tell us a story. They had us in like the Hebrew books. We would read the story of this family who before Pesach they went around and hid 10 pieces of bread and they could only find 9 of them. And then the whole rest of the night they were looking for the last piece of bread and it was a big disaster. But I remember that story. So a lot of people write down this is not a halacha. This is just good advice have the person who hides it write down where they hid it. That's what we do in my family. That the person who hides it writes it down, and then you're not worried that you're going to lose and forget where you hid the last chametz, and then you'll you'll be up all night looking for that. So there's a dispute if you have to do a check and also destroy chametz, which is smaller than kizayis. Kizayis means the size of an olive. Um, so the size of an olive, we say in halacha, is like a is not viewed as anything. So some say yes, that you still need to, and some say no, all you need to do is nullify it. If it's so small like that, just nullify it. Some say it depends if it's a crumb versus like let's say it's a small piece of food that you would eat, it's just smaller than the olive. Um, but and everyone would agree that if it was very small and it was stepped on and it's no longer edible, then all you need to do is really nullify that. Nevertheless, our practice, it's what we do is just we totally clean all the floors, all the chairs. We wipe down anything that might have touched chametz. We're very strict on this because um, we're very holy people and we want to be stringent for even a little bit of chametz to make sure that it's not there. Um, this is a halacha interesting that if you have a if you have a dish that is used for chametz, and you're not going to use it on Pesach, so you should just make sure that you wash it out well and that there's not little bits of, of pizza in your in your dishes um, anymore before you put it away. Uh, there's also a machlokas. Do you need to check your books for chametz? Let's say you like to snack as you like to read. So do I need to check my books, make sure that I have no chametz in my books? So some say yes, some say no, because you're not eating. Most people would not if they found even if it was a really good food, if they found it in their book, I don't think they would eat it. I personally would not. But some suggest that even if you're going to not check your books, if you know there's a book that you like to eat a lot of snacks with it, just don't put it on the table at the same time as you're eating on Pesach because there might be some crumbs that fall out. Some suggest that. Um, After you do this bedika chametz, make sure to keep all your chametz in one place where you know nobody's going to get to it and move it, especially if you have little kids around. Let's say you do the check and you put all 10 pieces of bread in one place. You don't want the kid to take it and scatter it around the house again. That would be a problem. Uh, this is important that if you forgot to do the bedika on the night of 14th, then you should do it the next possible moment. That means if you remember the next day, do it the next day. If you remember over Pesach, you still have to do it. You just shouldn't do it on the actual day of Yontif itself. Then you wouldn't do it, but you can do it on Chol Moed. Um, so regarding Bittul Chametz, which is the nullification of Chametz. So let's just clarify a few things. So what does it mean to nullify the Chametz? So immediately after you do the checking of the chametz, you do this nullification, which means you think and you say to yourself that any chametz that is in my possession is completely worthless to me and is like dirt. Uh, After you do that to all the chametz in your possession, after you do that, any chametz that's in your possession is what's called hefker, which means worthless. It's worthless to you, and it doesn't belong to me anymore. Um, we don't say a bracha when we nullify our chametz because that's just something that's really done in the heart. Something in the heart usually doesn't get a bracha. And this nullification can be said really in any language. It should just be a language that you understand, right? Don't say it in German if you don't understand German. If you say it in Hebrew or a language that you don't understand, then it will still work though, as long as you have a broad sense of what you're doing. Even if I don't understand every word, if I know that I'm nullifying my chametz, then that would still work. Just if you think that what you're saying is a prayer to God, then that's not going to work because what you're saying is not a prayer. You're just nullifying your chametz. We do this nullification in the night after we do the bedika. But when you're doing nullification, you should have you only have in mind chametz that you're in the night. You only have in mind chametz that you're not aware about because in the night you still have chametz in your house. You still have chametz that sometimes you want to eat chametz in the next morning, right? Cereal, you can still eat it um, in the next morning. Also the 10 pieces of bread that you found. So you're not nullifying those chametz. You're only nullifying the chametz that you're not aware about. That's why it's good when you do the burning of the chametz the next day that you also do another nullification, and this time you say on all the chametz that I'm aware about and that I'm not aware about, all of it. If someone's traveling, they can do this nullification from wherever they are. We'll finish by talking about really this idea if you're traveling, which is very common if you love to travel for chametz. I mean, sorry, for Pesach. They travel for Pesach. So what happens then in regards to this Badika? So one who's leaving his house for Pesach, if you're still in your home within 30 days of Pesach, which I imagine is fairly normal, that um, you're still in your house 30 days before Pesach, then you have to do a Badika Chametz. The You do Badika Chametz the night before you leave. So let's say you're planning on leaving, you're going to go to Israel, let's say a week before Pesach, then the night before you go to Israel, you should do a Badika Chametz. And you check that night and you do it without a bracha. Um, yeah, and then you should also make sure to do nullification of the chametz that's in your house. Yeah, and yeah, let's say you were planning on leaving those 30 more than 30 days before Pesach, then you wouldn't have to do a bedika. But you should still sell all the chametz that's in your house, even if you left more than 30 days in advance, because otherwise it's going to be chametz which passed over Pesach, which is a problem, and you wouldn't be allowed to eat it. If you're leaving a house which belongs, let's say you're in a house 30 days before Pesach, but doesn't belong to you, it belongs to a non-Jew, then obviously you don't need to check that house anymore because it's a non-Jew's house and they can have chametz. You just can't have chametz. Let's say you're renting a house for Pesach. Let's say you're in a rented house, so you should make sure to do b'dika chametz in that house. If a Jew's renting that house from another Jew, so that gets a little bit tricky about the dates when the transfer of possession is done. Who has to check the renter or the tenant? So that can get a little complicated. Let's say you're not renting from a. Let's to make it simple. Let's say you're not renting from a Jew. Let's say you're just in a hotel that's owned by non-Jews. So what do you do there? Do you do a badika chametz? So um, seems like like everyone said, you do the B'dikah Chametz. It is a machlokas, an argument. Do you say a bracha? Some say, yeah, it's just like if renting a house. If you're renting a house, you need to check all the rooms, and you'd say a bracha. So too, if you're in a hotel room. Others say that no, if you're in a hotel room or if you're in a Airbnb, they clean up very well. So there's not going to be any chametz there. You're not going to find anything there. So then you shouldn't say a bracha. Um, but you should still do the B'dikah. I think the practice is that we do say the bracha, especially if you leave 10 pieces of bread out. I'm pretty sure. But if you are traveling, you should make sure to ask a rav. Um, let's say you're visiting your parents or your children. So should you check? Should you do a badika, your own badika? So this also seems to be a dispute. Some say that if you have your own room there and nobody's gonna go into your room, then you should check your room and do a bedika chametz and make a bracha. Some suggest that you should like rent the room from them and pay them for the room, so that you could be obligated to do the checking and make a bracha. Others say that's everyone's gonna know that you're not really renting the room. That's like that just looks too fake, so that's not gonna work. So I'm not sure exactly what the practice is there, but if that is the case, then you should also make sure to ask a rav. There's a discussion if you live in a dorm room, um, should you check? So the answer is most agree that yeah, it's like renting, and you would have to do a check the night before you leave. And then finally, like we typically sell our chametz to a non-Jew, and we very often keep it in our homes. So we just talked about checking to make sure that there's no chametz in your house. how can that be allowed? You're gonna have chametz in your house. It might belong to a non-Jew, but how can I have chametz in the house? So Shulchan Aruch says no problem. You can have chametz in your house if it belongs to a non-Jew, and you don't need to destroy it. But you should just make sure to put up a barrier so that way you don't come to actually eat it. And that I think is the practice is that if you sold your chametz to a non-Jew and you have a little pantry where you're keeping your chametz, you just make sure to put a sign on there, put a barrier so that no one will go into those those shelves and eat the chametz. So I think we'll stop. I think we'll stop there. And next week we will continue with the halachos of Pesach.